Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Spark Learning Lab's Facebook Live event. Today, we will again be focusing on the newly released Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization Grant, which is a new funding stream available to help both early education and out-of-school time programs rebuild and strengthen their programs. My name is Mike Bachman, and I'm the director of Spark Learning Lab. Spark is providing multiple tiers of technical assistance to programs throughout this grant period. We will continue that today with this next episode of our Facebook Live series that delves more deeply into the Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization Grant for family childcare homes. We do want this session to be interactive, so if at any time you have any questions or comments, please post those. As always, our communications manager, Darcy Marlett, and we are also super excited to be joined by our family childcare Tier 3 coach, Marlene Toby, who are both monitoring the posts and will let me know if there's anything specific we can address on the air. If we are unable to address your specific comments or questions today, we will be sure to address them in future Facebook Live events or using the frequently asked questions on the Build, Learn, Grow website. Today, again, we are focused on family childcare home programs and the questions we have received pertinent to their businesses. So let's jump in. We will start with some questions around allowable expenses. Remember that grant funds can be used for things like personnel costs related to hiring, compensating, training, or retaining staff, health and safety, training like CPR or first aid, COVID-19 safety-related needs that will keep all of your staff and children safe, those goods and services necessary to resume and strengthen your operations, mental health supports such as counseling for you, your children, and any employees that you have, and then finally, facility fees like rent, mortgage, utilities, or maintenance. Again, our partners have created an allowable expenses guide that can be found on the Build, Learn, Grow website that delves more deeply into each of these. So we do ask that you go there, download, and keep that allowable expenses guide close at hand. Our first set of questions is around personnel costs. And our first question is, can the grant dollars be used for retirement? And the answer, yes, it can. In fact, by putting 25% or more of the awarded grant dollars towards retirement, you are not only using the funds for an allowable expense, but you also are meeting the grant requirement that states, my program will invest at least 25% of awarded funds towards increasing staff wages or benefits. Increasing your retirement is investing towards increasing benefits. So yes, you can use the grant dollars towards your retirement as a family childcare home provider. The next question is whether bonuses are an allowable expense. The answer here is yes. Again, the grant requires that 25% of the awarded grant be used to increase salaries and benefits. Giving yourself and anyone else working in your family childcare home or home-based childcare business a bonus that totals 25% or more of the granted award is allowable, and it meets this grant requirement. The third set of questions in this category are some that we have received often. Can the grant cover pay raises that have been given in the past? Does the grant cover existing staff wages or just raises? The answer to these questions is a yes and a no. According to the allowable expense guide that can be found on the Build, Learn, Grow website, the grant can be used to cover existing staff wages and salaries. However, the dollars that you put toward paying existing wages and salaries, even if you gave a raise or a bonus in the last year, does not count towards the 25% that must be invested in further increasing staff wages and benefits. So, yes, you can use the dollars to cover current staff wages, but the money you put towards current staff wages does not go towards the 25% requirement of increasing staff wages and benefits. You can use these dollars for bonuses. You cannot use these dollars to cover raises that have been used in the past year towards the 25%. Hopefully that's clear. I know it's a little confusing. An allowable expense is current staff wages, including your own, but that does not go towards the 25% increase. If you gave yourself or your staff a raise earlier this year, you can use the money to cover those costs. But again, that doesn't go towards the 25% requirement that is required by the grant. Now let's check in on some questions around allowable expenses for goods and services necessary to resume and strengthen your family childcare home operations. The first question is one that I greatly appreciate because it is so straightforward. Can the dollars be used to purchase food? The answer is yes. Again, our source is the Allowable Expenses Guide found on the Build, Learn, Grow website, a very, very helpful resource. The guide tells us that food and beverage services for program-provided meals are an allowable expense. Furthermore, the guide states that materials to run a childcare business are also an allowable expense. This means that if you need materials such as plates, cups, etc., to feed the children, these are also allowable for the grant. Next, if an appliance is used by the childcare home and it needs to be replaced, can the dollars be used for this? The answer is again, yes. If the appliance is needed to run the childcare business and major construction is not needed to install or replace the appliance, it is an approved expense, and the funds can be used to replace that appliance that is used by the childcare home business. For the support category facility fees, maintenance, and improvements, there seems to be some confusion and some hesitancy because the home childcare is both a business and a home. So the question becomes, how do I, as a family childcare home provider, know what I can replace and what I cannot? As always, Spark Learning Lab and the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning encourage you to speak with your tax preparer, your accountant, or any financial expert that is in your life. But there are some questions that we can provide answers and/or guidance to. Our first question is, the floors in my home childcare need replaced for sanitary reasons. Can the money be used for new floors in my home? The answer here is maybe. First, you can only pay for fees, maintenance, and improvements in spaces that are used for the childcare business. Some of you may use every room in your home, and some may have rooms set aside for your childcare business. Either way, the grant can only pay for fees, maintenance, and improvements in the areas that are used by the childcare business. Next, we have to look at the guidance, which states that the grant dollars can be used for facility maintenance and improvements to include minor renovations that do not meet the definition of major renovation. Major renovation is defined as structural changes to the foundation, roof, floor, exterior, or load-bearing walls of a facility, or the extension of a facility to increase its floor area, or extensive alteration of a facility, such as to significantly change its function and purpose, even if such renovation does not include any structural change. And when we talk about structural facility, we are talking in this case about, for many of you, your home. The guidance also includes building, and so you can see from this guidance that you may be able to replace your flooring, depending upon whether or not it is only in the areas that you use your childcare business, and as long as you are not meeting the definition for major renovation, right? So if you are replacing your current flooring without structural changes and only in the areas where you have your childcare business, then yes, the grant can be used to replace your flooring. Again, this is really getting into the nitty-gritty of these things, a lot of ifs and ands, and I know it can be confusing. So again, if you have further questions, please post those. Darcy and Marlene are on the chat, and they will be able to hopefully respond. If they cannot, we'll do our very best to answer your question later in the event or after the event, in a later event, or using the FAQs. Our second question then is another that we have received from many home program owners, and it is whether a mortgage is an eligible expense for a home childcare. The answer to this question is yes. However, we strongly encourage you to work with your accountant or tax professional. In some cases, because your home childcare business is also in your home, based on the amount of the home used for the childcare business, only a portion or a percentage of the mortgage may be eligible. It is always best to ask before you spend. The next question is whether or not a fire alarm system is an allowable expense. The answer here is yes. Adding a fire alarm system to the home childcare business area of the home is an allowable improvement to increase the health and safety for the children and staff of the program. Finally, home providers have asked if they upgraded areas of their home to meet licensing requirements, are these expenses allowable? The answer is again yes, as long as the improvement did not meet the definition of major renovation that we discussed earlier. So it could not have created structural change. You cannot remove load-bearing walls, those various things that we talked about earlier in terms of major renovation. As long as you have receipts, invoices, or other documents that demonstrate that this small improvement took place between January 31st of 2020 and September 30th of 2023, the grant can be used to pay for these improvements, even if the upgrades happened before the grant was awarded. So again, yes, upgrades that you have done previously can, the grant dollars can support. The next set of questions have been about the actual application process. First, let's talk through quickly what the application structure looks like. When you come into the application, the first thing that you are going to be asked to do is review basic information about your family childcare home program, including your address, that you are a family childcare home, that your name and contact information is correct, and then also to confirm that your program meets the related eligibility requirements for the grant. Next, you're going to enter enrollment and staffing information for your program. This information will include age groups that are served in your childcare home, the typical number of staff present at one time, which for many of you might just be you, although some of you may have family members who are also there on a regular basis, or you have assistants who are there on a regular basis. You will also include the average attendance and maximum capacity of your program. Then you will be presented with an estimated grant award to support your monthly operating expenses. The total that you are provided considers that you are a family child care home, your average attendance that you entered, your staffing costs that you entered, your quality level on paths to quality, and where your program is located or the geography. After you review, you'll have the option to accept that amount or decline that amount. If you decline that amount, then your application might take a bit longer to be approved, as someone will be contacting you to discuss what about the number that was provided to you was off. If you press that you agree to that amount, then you'll be moved on to the banking information, where you will enter your banking account information to establish direct deposit for receiving those grant dollars. Again, if you've already set up direct deposit previously, you're simply just going to review and confirm that the information on your screen at that point in the application is correct. Then you'll look at the subcategories. So those 6 allowable expenses. You'll review those approved expense categories and click any of the boxes where you intend to spend the money. Finally, you come to the agreements, and we spent a lot of time on our last Facebook Live event around the agreements, the 12 agreements and what those are. But again, you'll be asked to review those and confirm that you understand and plan to adhere to them during the entire grant period. So in looking at these, we've received some questions first around enrollment counts. So in terms of enrollment counts, family child care programs have asked, if I operate 24 hours per day, is there an option to put that within the application so that it will make sense with the enrollment numbers? To answer this, I strongly recommend going to the Build, Learn, Grow website or My Spark Learning Lab and downloading the Stabilization Grant Worksheet. The worksheet is now available in both locations and provides you guidance on how to respond to the questions in the application. And it provides you space to add your answer to those questions. So when you go into the grant application, you just need to review and plug in some numbers. Now, on the worksheet, it states that the average classroom attendance is the number of slots available in your classroom or your family childcare home that are typically occupied. An average value should take into account variability in attendance throughout the day or week. Average classroom attendance will not equal total classroom capacity unless all available licensed slots are filled. In addition, it will not equal total classroom or family childcare home enrollment if the same slot is shared by more than one enrolled child throughout the day or week, such as in the case of providers operating separate morning and afternoon childcare sessions, or those operating a 24-hour family childcare home. So what exactly does this mean for the 24-hour family childcare home? It asks you to think about, throughout the 24-hour period, how many children on average are present in the program, or if you have multiple classrooms in your home program, in each of those classrooms. While there is not a specific or separate option for the 24-hour childcare in the application, there is a way to calculate and report for a 24-hour period. So in terms of the question, is there an option to do that? Yes, there is. It just takes a little bit more thought when you think about in one classroom or in your family childcare home, you might have more than one child filling a licensed spot because you're operating multiple sessions a day. The next question, can staff that are 1099 be used in figuring out total staff salary? Some childcare home business people choose to contract employees through a 1099 rather than have them as a part-time or a full-time employee. These contracted fees are part of your monthly expenses and should be included when determining your estimated monthly costs. Again, the stabilization worksheet is a helpful tool in thinking through your expenses. So yes, staff that are 1099, the amount you are paying to that contract employee or through that contract is part of your monthly expenses and should be included when figuring your total monthly expenses. Speaking of expenses, some questions that we have received about expenses, some of the questions that we have received are about expenses and how the grant is calculated. So here are some questions that we've received and how we can respond. Does PTQ impact the estimated grant award amount? There are several factors that are included when determining how much it costs to care for and educate a child. One of those factors is quality. As you all know, research has shown time and time again that higher quality programming is more costly to operate than lower quality programming. In Indiana, our state uses PASDA quality as a way of recognizing the quality of a program. While a program may be high quality and choose to not be in PASDA quality, there is no way for the state to assess the quality of that program without PASDA quality participation. So we are in no way saying that programs not on PASDA quality are not high quality. There is just no way in the state of Indiana right now to determine how quality that program is if they are not participating in PASDA quality. So PASDA quality rating is used to gauge the quality of a program in Indiana. Quality is a factor that determines cost of care for each child in the program. Cost of care is a determinant of monthly expenses, right? The more it costs to care for a child, the more my monthly expenses are going to be. And the grant pays 3 times your monthly expenses. So the answer to this question is yes. PASDA quality participation and level do impact the estimated grant amount, and it may make better business sense to enroll in PASDA quality, or if your program is planning to advance in PASDA quality before December 30th of 2021, to actually wait to submit the grant, as PASDA quality does impact the estimated grant award amount. However, just as a reminder, you do not have to be enrolled in PASDA quality or a certain level in PASDA quality to be eligible for the grant. Eligibility is different than the amount that you can receive. Again, if you have any questions, we're getting into the nitty-gritty. So if you have any questions, be sure to post those. Finally, we have been asked about the guidance that we gave when talking to a financial expert before submitting your grant. The question is, if we need to talk to a financial expert before filling out the application, how do we know the amount we will receive to base the advice on? That is a fantastic question, and we truly appreciate those family childcare homes that are paying attention, that are in listening to the live events and continuing to post and ask those questions. This came specifically from another Facebook live event that we did. And as I've said, we will answer your questions in future Facebook events. So that's what we're here to do today. So according to the frequently asked questions on the Build, Learn, Grow website, providers can start an application, save it, and come back later to continue working on it and submit it. With this in mind, a family childcare home provider could complete the application up until this point in the process, the point where you are at the expenses portion, and you have received your estimated grant award total. You can then write down or print out, screenshot, whatever it is, that estimated grant award, save your application, leave and go speak to your accountant or your financial expert to make plan for those dollars as is stated on your estimated grant award. Then come back later to submit your application. So that would be the way that we suggest you are able to know what is the amount I'm expected to receive, talk to a financial advisor of some sort, and then submit the grant. So I have a plan for how I'm going to use the money before I submit the grant application. Finally, we're going to spend some time addressing questions that relate to the grant requirements or program agreements that are found in the last section of the application. We spent about an hour in our last Facebook Live event digging into these. And so now we've received questions that are specific to family childcare homes that we want to make sure that we can provide some guidance and answers to. Please remember that the Build, Learn, Grow partners have created a helpful resource so you can review the requirements of the stabilization grant before you get into the application. The resource can be found, again, both on the Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization website and in My Spark Learning Lab. So I do suggest you go to the website or to My Spark Learning Lab, download this resource and review these agreements, these requirements before you go in and complete your application. The first agreement we've received quite a few questions on is this one. My program will invest at least 25% of awarded funds toward increasing staff wages or benefits. Note, providers may not use these awarded funds to supplant or replace existing costs, but rather must invest in new wage benefit enhancements. This requirement does not apply to local educational agencies, which is okay, because most of our audience today are our family childcare homes. So we have received the question, but if these funds pay payroll expenses, then we can use what we usually use to pay payroll in order to increase the wages and benefits. The answer to this takes a little bit of explaining. Remember that you're required to spend 25% of the funds on increasing staff wages and benefits. So if you documented through receipts or through staffing plans, through timesheets, however you do that, that 100% of the funds were used to pay yourself and any current employees that you have, then used what you would have put towards your wages to increase the staff wages, you actually didn't meet this requirement. You supplanted and replaced your existing costs. In order to meet this requirement, you must show documentation that 25% of the grant award was used to increase your wages, your benefits, and that of any staff that you have. Then you can use up to 75% of the rest of the grant for other requirements or allowable expenses. So 25% to increase, and then I could use as much as I wanted to of the other 75% to pay pay my current payroll expenses. And then by paying those expenses, I'm relieving some other dollars that I could use towards other things. Again, I hope that makes sense. Drop any posts into the chat there and we'll do our best to respond. The second question we received, could a family childcare home provider use the grant to pay a mortgage for up to 3 months, then use that to raise our employee wages? The answer to this question is largely the same concept. You must use 25% of the grant to increase your staff wages and benefits. You can use up to 75% of the awarded grant to pay for any allowable expense, including a mortgage, then use the money that you would have spent on the mortgage to increase wages and benefits further, or to support the ongoing costs of those increased wages and benefits. So really, when you get those grant dollars, you need to calculate the 25%. You need to somehow set in your mind, in your paperwork, whatever that is, set aside 25% of this money. And all of those dollars have to go towards increasing wages and benefits for you and or any family members or staff that are working in your family childcare home. Then whatever is left, you can use for any of the other allowable expenses. Now, this isn't to say you can't spend 100% on retirement or 100% on increasing your wage or the wage of your family or your other staff. That would meet this requirement also. But at least 25% does have to be put towards that. The other 75% can be used in regards to, or be used for any other requirements or allowable expenses. The final questions around documentation, the final questions that we've received are around documentation and pertain to these three agreements. So I'll read those first and then go through some of the questions that we have received. My program will follow all required tracking and reporting, including maintaining financial documentation for purpose of audits. My program will not utilize these funds to pay outstanding taxes. My program will not utilize funds to pay for expenses already covered by other federal, state, or local relief funds or grants. So first, the question, will we need to upload any spreadsheets or reports like payroll liability reports? Now, as we've discussed in previous Facebook Live events, there will be a report of some kind that is required to be completed before you submit for another round of funding. So probably sometime in December or January, before the second round of funding comes up, you're going to go into the exact same portal to submit your next round of grant. But before you can do that, you'll have to complete some kind of report about how you are spending the money and what money has been spent. What that report requires is yet to be determined. So we can't say whether you will be required to upload any documents. However, you are required per this first agreement on your screen to keep all documents pertaining to how you expended these grant dollars for 5 years. So even if you don't have to upload it, you do need to have it on hand for 5 years should you be audited. Another question, how do we reimburse from January 2020? Well, first, just to clarify, this grant is not a reimbursable grant. You are not being asked to front your own money, to go out and spend money and then submit receipts and then you get paid by the state. You are paid a lump sum based on your monthly expenses. In order to meet the audit requirements for purchases made prior to the grant being awarded, you will need to have a proof of purchase for whatever the item or items are. They have to be allowable under the grant, and the proof of purchase, whether that's a receipt or an invoice or staff records, your timesheets, whatever that might be, have to be dated January 31st, 2020 through September 30th, 2023. So how do you use the funds for purchases that you made prior to the grant being awarded all the way back to January 31st of 2020? You just need to make sure you have the documentation, that documentation is for items purchased under the allowable expenses and that they were purchased January 31st of 2020 through September 30th of 2023. We have also been asked about other funding sources. For instance, what if I already received a PPP loan or the Paycheck Protection Program loan? Having received other federal funding throughout the pandemic does not exclude you from being eligible for the stabilization grant. I'll say that again. Having received other federal funding like the PPP, the EIDL, CARES grants, temporary closure grants, any of these and others, having received these throughout the pandemic does not exclude you from being eligible for the stabilization grant. But as the third agreement on your screen states, you cannot utilize these dollars to pay for things that other grants have paid for. For instance, if you used another grant to purchase masks and hand sanitizer in March of 2021, you cannot use those same receipts for these grant dollars. That's double dipping, right? You're saying that this one receipt was paid by two different sources of money. So you cannot do that. You can purchase more masks and hand sanitizer if you need, but you cannot use the same purchases for two different grants. The last set of questions that we have prepared responses for today are around taxes, which is a hot topic, and we've been receiving a lot of questions around. So we want to clarify some misinformation that is out there. This grant requirement, the second one on your screen here, states that the grant cannot be used for outstanding taxes. So we have been asked, please clarify, what does that mean? This means taxes that were not paid off from previous years, also sometimes referred to as back taxes. So you cannot use these grant dollars to pay off your taxes from 2020, 2019, 2018, 2021, right? Even though they might have been incurred during the grant period, you cannot use them to pay those back taxes. However, moving forward, you can. So if, for instance, your business has to pay taxes in April of 2022, because you received this grant as income in October of 2021, these dollars can be used to pay those taxes. So anything that is outstanding, that are those back taxes prior to, you cannot use these grant dollars for. Moving forward, should you require or incur tax implications because you accept this as income, which everyone will accept this as income, should you accept these grant dollars, you could use the grant dollars for those tax implications. We've received a lot of questions also from our homes about, what if I am a 501c3? What if I am a nonprofit or a tax-exempt organization? What does that mean for me when you talk about taxes? For those, we're going to ask that you do direct any of those questions to your tax preparer, your accountant, or your financial expert. Spark Learning Lab is working diligently in agreement with the Indiana CPA Society to actually get some accountants, some CPAs available to answer your questions specific to these, such as being a nonprofit or being exempt, tax exempt, and what that means for you, just in case you don't have one. But if you do have a tax preparer, an accountant, some sort of financial expert, please ask them about the tax implications for your program, as that is a very specific need to your program. And with that, that is all the questions that we have prepared for today based on the questions that you have provided us specific to family child care homes. So at this point, Darcy, I do invite you to come on, and if there's been anything posted, I'd be glad to answer whatever I can in the next 10 minutes or so here.
Sure, we definitely have quite a few questions in the chat. So one that I highlighted is what Michelle asked, what is the maximum percentage we can apply to increased bonus and retirements?
Yeah, great question. So you must spend at least 25% on those things, on increasing staff wages and benefits, but you can spend as much of the grant as you would like on increasing staff wages and benefits. Now, remember, some of the other requirements like tax implications, right? There might be some other things that come up that you might want to spend those grant dollars on. But in terms of how much can you spend, you can spend as much as you want as long as you have spent 25% or more.
Thank you, Mike. Angie Scott asked, for the retirement portion, does it need to be spread out evenly among all staff?
That is a very good question, and one that I would like you to talk to your accountant or your tax preparer or a financial expert about, right? Who can help you think about what are the best benefit and retirement packages to offer for both yourself and all of your staff. There is nothing in the guidance or in the grant that says that the grant has to be spread equally amongst all, but obviously we want to make sure that we are being equitable, that we are being fair. And so really thinking about what are the best packages that you can find or could be provided to you, your accountant or tax preparer should be able to assist you with that.
Thank you. Heather asked, is a bonus, since I'm my only employee, acceptable as the 25%?
Yes, it is, Heather. In terms of increasing staff wages and benefits, a benefit would be a bonus or a bonus structure of some kind. And should you want to just take 25% of your grant and give yourself a bonus for the work that you have done and to retain you in this business, then that would be allowable and would meet the requirement.
Great. Kimberly Stinson asked, what if I'm in the process of hiring? Can the grant be used for new hires?
If you are in the process of hiring, yes. So under the allowable expenses in the bucket of personnel costs, it does talk about the hiring, the retaining of your staff. And so, yes, now the money that you spend to hire new staff is not going to go towards the 25% increasing staff wages and benefits. But once you have paid that 25% and you've taken care of that part of the requirement, then you can use as much as you would like underneath the allowable expense personnel costs for hiring bonuses, however you would like to use that.
Thank you. Oli asked, what about replacing windows? And we did get several other questions about window replacements in a home.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So again, this is one of those howevers, right? So you want to make sure that it does not meet the definition of a major renovation, right? So you're not structurally changing your program. You're not changing your home as to change the purpose of the business, right? You also want to be thinking about you're only replacing the windows that are in the childcare business portion of your home. You can't, and if you don't use your entire home, then you shouldn't be replacing all your windows. You would just be replacing those that impact your home business, because these dollars are for your home business. And then the last thing I would say is we always have that however clause of talking to your tax preparer, because again, depending on how much of your home is used, there are some percentage algorithms that come out in tax preparation that can help you to understand how many windows you could replace. But for your question, is that an allowable expense? Yes, to replace the windows for the health and safety of the children, to maintain temperature, which is a licensing requirement. Yes, that would be an allowable expense in the childcare business portion of your home.
Thank you, Mike. Sarah did ask for some clarification around the new hire, the questions you answered in the previous. She asked, are new wages associated with a new hire counted towards the 25% or not?
You know, that's a very specific question. And I guess I'd like to understand more at what point is the salary increased? So if you are using the dollars, well, I'm going to table that one, Darcy. We're going to go back and ask a few others about that. I apologize. but I just want to make sure that we're giving you the right information.
No problem. Cynthia asked if we have questions regarding the calculation of our grant, who do we ask?
Yeah. So if you get to the expenses portion of the application and the estimated grant total is not in line with what you believe your monthly expenses are, either it's too much or too little, then what you want to do is decline or click no, that is not the right amount. After doing that, you will be put into a queue, and one of the representatives of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning will be contacting you to discuss more why that number is not correct, work through that with you before your grant total is approved. So the best thing to do is when you get to that screen and it asks you, is this the correct amount, to say no or to decline that amount, so that you can be contacted for a one-on-one conversation, one-on-one consultation.
Thank you. Sarah asked, regarding total revenue, do you only include parent payments or also funding from food programs, CCDF, etc., or other grant money received?
So and again, I strongly encourage you to go to the stabilization grant worksheet, which you can find on the Build, Learn, Grow stabilization website, as well as within my Spark Learning Lab. It's available in various languages, so hopefully we'll meet everyone's needs. What you are asked to input is actually your monthly expenses in terms of what you are spending, not always what you are taking in terms of revenue. And so I'm not sure that is a factor that you would come up against in terms of what other funding streams are paid into you or your business.
Thank you. Melissa asked, if I use my basement, could I use grant dollars to make my basement handicapped accessible?
Yes, you can. So if you look into the Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization Grant Allowable Expense Guide, again, available in both places on the Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization website and in my Spark Learning Lab, you will see there that accessibility, maintenance, and improvements is an allowable expense. But again, you have to go back to that definition of major renovations, right? You can't be structurally changing your floor plan or structurally changing your home in some way or changing the purpose of the business in the home. And so you would want to make sure to ask the questions first, contacting, if nothing else, Spark Learning Lab or the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning, and talking about some more specifics about what you're planning to do, right? Are you planning to put in a ramp? Are you planning to put in one of those mechanical chairs, right? The motorized chairs that goes down the steps. Are you planning to in some way like re-level your home? Any of those may or may not be the correct way to go in a major renovation. So I just think some more conversation about the specifics of your home might be necessary.
Thank you. Kimberly just asked, if it says we are approved once we've submitted the application, is that all we do?
Yes, if it does say you are approved once you submit the application, then that is all you do. At that point, right? This is also when you start planning. So you need to take that you need to take that grant award amount. You need to start figuring out what is 25%? How am I going to increase wages and benefits? Are there any tax implications that I need to be thinking about or that I might need to use these dollars for? And then where else and how else am I going to spend this money? In terms of anything to do for the grant, no. I do believe from the FAQs on the Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization Grant website, all grants are paid within 3 weeks through direct deposit. So the money is on its way to you within that 3-week period.
You might. Let me just scan to see if we have any additional questions. We have time for a couple more.
Yes, just a couple more.
Okay. Ellen R. Childcare asked, can the dollars be used to reimburse ourselves for operating costs, such as electric, water, and internet from January 2020 through today?
Yes, so those would be the utilities that fall under the facility fees, maintenance and improvements. So yes, everything that you mentioned there would be a utility. It is a utility for business purposes. And so yes, it can be these dollars could be used to reimburse you for those expenses. Again, there may be some percentages there based on how much of your home is used for your childcare business. Okay, and so those are all laid out, those percentages are laid out in taxes, right? So when you submit your taxes, there's a portion of your home that you submit as your home business, and there is a portion that is your residential home. And so you're going to want to talk with your tax preparer or with an accountant to understand what percentage of those utilities you should be reimbursing yourself using these grant dollars.
Great. And Jennifer just asked a good one to wrap us up on. Is there a deadline on when we have to spend this money?
Yes, there is. So all money has to be expended by September 30th of 2023. So you do have the entire grant period of January 30th, 2020 through September 30th of 2023 to expend all of the dollars. Now, again, as you are requesting more dollars in any subsequent rounds of funding, you will be asked to report how much have you spent and in what areas have you spent it. But that does not mean it all has to be spent right away or by December 30th, for instance. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate both the way the federal government and the state of Indiana, the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning, have set that up, because you might need some of these dollars to sustain some of the things that you do along the way. For instance, you might use 25% to increase your wage, and then you will have to use some of the 75% over the next few years to sustain that increase in wage, right? Because as the grant requirements state, you have to maintain all of those grant requirements until September 30th of 2023, not just until you spend the dollars. So yes, everything does need to be expended by September 30th of 2023. Thank you for the question.
Great. Just for y'all to let you guys know, I'm going to drop into the chat the link to the main stabilization grant page. That will give you some more information and FAQs and allow you to download the allowable expenses guide. You'll also see under support some information to our help desk, which Mike will cover here at the end as well. Our help desk is able to go through and cover some more specific questions if you have questions not addressed in the FAQ or we haven't been able to address live for your specific home or business. Some questions are just a little easier to work through when you're able to go back and forth and ask questions with one of our support professionals.
Thank you so much, Darcy. And one last thing, I got a couple of last things. So we'll start here. So as we've talked about, you can learn so much more about the stabilization grant. You can check out the frequently asked questions, which are constantly, daily being updated. We are always adding new tools, new resources, new things to that website by going to stabilization.buildlearngrow.org. As Darcy said, you can always contact Spark Learning Lab at help@indianaspark.com or dialing 1-800-299-1627. Just follow the voice prompts to get to Spark Learning Lab's help desk, and you can ask our help desk representatives any specific questions that you would like. Live chat with our help desk representatives is also available on indianaspark.com, as well as in My Spark Learning Lab, which you access through the iLead portal. We do have 2 more Facebook Live events coming up, one for centers and ministries and one for school-based. The dates and times are on your screen. I know that many of you out there are family childcare homes, but I also know that we have family childcare homes and home-based childcares here in the state of Indiana, where owners operate centers, ministries, or are working within schools as well as their family childcare homes. So if that's you and this information would be pertinent to you, we do suggest that you join us then. All Facebook Live events are recorded and they will be posted on the Build, Learn, Grow Stabilization Grant website and on indianaspark.com's homepage. So please be watching for those. This is the 3rd of the 5-part series. And so if you've missed any of the others from last week, it's great to go back. A lot of good information in those Facebook Live events. two last things before we go. One, if you have any feedback as we are thinking about how we continue these Facebook Live events, if there is anything that we could do better, if there is anything that you have really appreciated that you want to make sure we continue doing, please be sure to post those, send us a message on Facebook, call us, send us an email, let us know your feedback so that we are sure that we are providing you the technical assistance that you need to be successful with these, what have been called life-changing stabilization grant dollars. The last thing that I want to mention is we have had some misnomer, some misinformation out there about the technical assistance requirement that is in the grant. So if you remember, one of the grant requirements is that you participate in any technical assistance that is required by the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. And so we've seen some comments that by participating in these Facebook Live events, you are meeting that requirement. And that is actually not true. These Facebook Live events are just a way for us to get information out to the masses to help you make the best decisions possible. There will be more in-depth technical assistance opportunities coming up later this winter and early next year, going through September 30th of 2023. And programs will be required to participate in some of that technical assistance along the way. So please continue to watch for more information about the technical assistance that is required by the grant, and continue to join us for these Facebook Live events, as we understand the information has been very helpful for so many of you out there. For Darcy, Marlene, and myself, we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining us for our Facebook Live event today. And please join us next Tuesday if the Center's ministries information is pertinent to you. Take care, everyone.